We see the latest news. Disaster has struck the world. Strange outbreaks of madness have hit 12 countries and now have reached the west coast of the USA. Rumors suggest it's some kind of an unknown virus. Former UN investigator Gary Lane isn't aware of this yet. He spends the morning with his family. Their concern is not the news but getting ready for school. The main thing is not to forget the inhaler for one of the daughters. Sadly, the trip doesn't go as planned. The family gets stuck in traffic. Police cars pass by. Helicopters fly now and then. An explosion occurs nearby, triggering panic. People are rushing out of their cars, running between them. A truck speeds recklessly, smashing cars and people in its path. Gary follows the truck and manages to escape the traffic jam, but his luck ends there. The car gets into an accident and crashes. People are running around in a frenzy, looking like madmen. Gary witnesses one of them biting a person. The victim falls and convulses, but after 12 seconds, he gets up and opens his eyes. There's nothing human left in those eyes anymore. Fighting off the madman, Gary leads his family into a stranger's van. They manage to leave the city. Only on the way do the parents realize that their daughter's inhaler was left in the abandoned car. Meanwhile, the UN Deputy Secretary General Thierry Umotoni flies over the city. From the helicopter, he sees Philadelphia burning. Thierry calls his former subordinate, Gary Lane. He informs Gary that he needs to return to service. He and his family will be evacuated from the nearest city. While waiting for the evacuation, Gary searches for a pharmacy. People are acting insane. Everyone is threatening each other with weapons and engaging in looting. But even in this chaos, there are those who remain human. Convinced that Gary is not a looter, a young pharmacy worker helps him find the inhaler for his daughter. Thierry Umotoni informs Gary that he must reach the outskirts of the city and go up to a rooftop. He'll be evacuated from there. Navigating the streets, Gary notices how mobs of zombies attack people, but not a drunken homeless old man. The monsters don't seem to notice him. Arriving at the designated building, Gary barely manages to fight off the zombies. At the last moment, he's assisted. Ordinary Latin American immigrants let the strangers into their apartment, providing them with food and shelter. Their son Thomas comforts Gary's daughters. Gary begs the family to leave with him. He says that movement is life. That's the only way they can survive. However, the couple is afraid to leave the apartment. Gary takes his family and leaves the strangers home. Thomas's parents lock the door, but zombies start pounding at it. Almost reaching the roof, Gary falls into the monster's hands. His life is about to end when young Thomas saves him. The boy is alone. It's not hard to guess what happened to his parents. Gary reaches the rooftop. There, he stands on the edge ready to jump and counts to 12 seconds. The thing is, during the fight, zombie blood got into his mouth. But 12 seconds pass and Gary doesn't turn into a zombie. He realizes that the virus is transmitted only through bites. A helicopter arrives. Soldiers fend off the monsters and evacuate Gary, his wife, his daughters, and little Thomas. They are taken to an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. There, Gary meets Thierry Umotoni. He asks his old friend, has the disease struck the whole world? And it seems so. America is already left without a president and a government. Chaos reigns everywhere. There is no fuel, no weapons, and no ammunition. People from the mainland are pleading for an evacuation, but there's nowhere to evacuate them to. The military's only hope is a young virologist. The guy notices the first mention of zombies first appeared in a report from South Korea. Perhaps the source of the virus is right there, and if they manage to find a source, they can create a vaccine. A high-ranking military officer appears. He informs that sending the virologist on an expedition alone is utter madness. He will be accompanied by soldiers and Gary Lane. The thing is, he's an experienced soldier who survived military operations in Liberia, Chechnya, and Sri Lanka. The man agrees, because otherwise he and his family will be sent to a refugee camp on shore. The expedition begins. Gary asks the virologist if he believes there's still hope for survival. The virologist confidently says yes. Every disease has a weak spot, and people are stronger than they think. Sometimes what looks like our weakness can become our greatest weapon. The group arrives at their destination. Zombies immediately attack the soldiers. In the chaos, the young virologist falls and accidentally shoots himself. The expedition seems doomed, but Gary decides to continue the investigation. He questions the local soldiers. It turns out the first soldier who got infected went on a leave to the local village. It's now impossible to determine who infected him, but the virus quickly spread through the base from him. Questioning the soldiers, Lane uncovers a few facts. Firstly, zombies react most strongly to sound. It's better not to make noise when around them. Secondly, when an infected person bit a bunch of people, one soldier survived. Gary talks to him. The lucky survivor is injured and doesn't look well. He confesses that he felt unwell even before the zombie apocalypse began. He doesn't know why zombies attacked everyone but him. In the same compound, there's a former CIA agent who became a war criminal. The man looks completely insane, but Gary wants to hear what he has to say. The man reveals that in North Korea, they managed to suppress the outbreak by removing all citizens' teeth. After all, without teeth, they can't bite and zombies can't infect others. Gary doesn't believe this, but the CIA officer doesn't give up and shares something else. He claims that the only country that managed to close its borders before the outbreak was Israel. Mossad seemed to know everything in advance. Gary decides to fly to Jerusalem, but first he needs to refuel his plane. Soldiers try to reach the plane as quietly as possible, not attracting the attention of the monsters. But then Gary's phone starts ringing. His wife is calling. Zombies start rushing towards the sound. A fight breaks out. One of the soldiers gets bitten in the leg. He decides it's better to shoot himself in the head than to turn into a monster. They manage to refuel the plane. It takes off and Gary heads to Israel. It seems that the madman from the CIA was right. Jerusalem is surrounded by a tall wall and protected from the monsters. Gary manages to meet with a representative from Mossad. The representative confesses. A week before the pandemic began, they picked up a strange message from India. It reported that the Indian army was fighting some monsters called the Rakshasas. The man explains that historically, Jews have had to fight for their lives many times. Now, they have to live by the principle of better safe than sorry. That's why Israel closed its borders before everyone else. Gary walks around Jerusalem. It's a calm and safe place. People are enjoying themselves in the square, singing and dancing. However, the noise attracts a horde of zombies to the city. The monsters start climbing over each other. The tower of bodies keeps getting higher and higher. Finally, zombies topple over one of the walls. Chaos and gunfire erupt in the city. Gary, along with a group of soldiers, tries to reach the airport. He sees the zombies passing by an elderly man and a bald young man. The young man simply sits down in the middle of the road. He seems invisible to the monsters. Zombies catch up with Gary's team and bite a female officer on the hand. Gary reacts instantly and severs her infected limb. The girl screams in horror. 12 seconds pass, but she doesn't turn into a monster. The virus didn't have enough time to spread through her body. Gary takes her and reaches the runway. They board a plane that's departing from Jerusalem. While the city below descends into chaos, on the plane, everything is calm. Gary treats the girl's wound and recalls everything he's seen in the past few days. He remembers how zombies ignored a homeless drunkard in America, how they left a sick soldier untouched in South Korea, and how they didn't pay attention to an elderly man and a bald guy in Israel. He also recalls the words of the young virologist. He said that sometimes a person's weakness is their greatest strength. Gary calls his friend from the UN. He asks him to find a working laboratory that he can manufacture a vaccine. The plane is redirected to a research center in Cardiff. Suddenly, a stewardess notices that a dog is barking at the baggage compartment door. She opens the door and a zombie bursts out. The plane is small and crowded. The virus spreads almost instantly, strapping himself and the female officer to their seats. Gary pulls out a grenade pin and throws it into the crowd of zombies. The plane explodes. Decompression occurs, blowing all the monsters out of the cabin. The plane crashes near Cardiff. Gary is severely injured. The female officer helps him reach the city. In the medical center, he undergoes surgery. He regains consciousness after 3 days. He explains to the doctors that he needs a dangerous but curable virus. It appears that zombies don't attack people who are seriously ill. Weak prey simply doesn't interest them. The doctors agree to test Gary's theory. Unfortunately, the pathogens they need are in another wing of the facility, swarming with zombies. Gary and the volunteer doctors set off for the pathogen. 3 out of 4 return empty-handed. However, our hero finds himself in the right laboratory. Around him are hundreds of test tubes with dangerous samples. The lab is surrounded by monsters. If Gary wants to escape alive, he has to inject himself with something dangerous but not lethal. But what? The doctors are observing him through the cameras, but can't say anything. The connection is one-sided. Gary randomly chooses a test tube, injecting himself with the pathogen, waits a while, and opens the laboratory door. Zombies rush towards him, but pass by him, as if not noticing him. The man realizes his plan worked. He walks through the crowd of monsters, becoming invisible. An antidote is immediately administered to Gary to prevent the pathogen from killing him. It's a victory. Our hero returns to his family. A camouflage vaccine is created worldwide. Soldiers are now invisible to zombies and can deal with them effectively. We see the successful monster elimination happening across the world. Yes, this war is just beginning, but it's clear who will win. By the way, subscribing to the channel gives you immunity to zombie bites. You've been watching the Movie Cat channel. I'll see you soon.